Let me share the rules for working the night shift at Stuckey Gas Station. These aren't the usual guidelines about quantifying the register or mopping the floors. No, I'm talking about the other rules, the ones that keep you alive until morning. Rule 1. Always wear the name tag you are given. If you find a second name tag, write down the name and place it in the lost and found immediately. Do not read the name aloud. Rule 2. Don't rely on the gas pumps to function past midnight, especially if they're operating solo. If they malfunction, don't investigate. Rule 3. If a customer asks about the weather, ignore them. Pretend you didn't hear anything. Rule 4. If the camera above the counter comes into view, avert your eyes. Rule 5. When the delivery truck arrives, check the package for today's date. If the date is absent or incorrect, do not accept the delivery. Rule 6. If someone asks to use the bathroom, give them the key. If they lock the door behind them, do not check on them if they take longer than 10 minutes inside. Rule 7. At 3:33 a.m., someone will ring the doorbell, claiming to be your replacement. Let them in, no matter what they say. Rule 8. One shelf in the shop should always be empty. If you find it full, remove the products immediately. Avoid reaching for items on the bottom shelf near the refrigerator. Rule 9. Do not take any pictures in the shop. Whatever images you capture during your shift will not be available to you at the end of your duty. Rule 10. If you forget that the gas station will be closed, write down a single word that holds personal meaning for you on the bathroom mirror. Now, let me explain how desperation led me down this road. Brooke gripped the steering wheel tighter, her knuckles turning white against the fading light of the blood-orange sunset that bled across the sky, casting long shadows that danced with dust devils spinning far down the road. Route 66 stretched out before her like a memory curling into an uncertain future, littering the passenger seat with camera equipment. Lenses rolled up in leather pouches, a tripod crammed unceremoniously between crumpled gallery rejection letters. Each rejection felt like a weight, dragging her further into the abyss. Reminders of dreams that once chased her now crumbled to dust. Brooke inhaled deeply, trying to shake off the creeping sense of futility as the GPS flickered ominously, recalculating. Its voice was soundly robotic, yet mocking. She scowled at the screen just as it flickered out completely, leaving her with nothing but the endless blur of asphalt ahead. In the rearview mirror, strange lights curved and whirled, glistening momentarily before revealing something black and amorphous that vanished when she looked again. Regretfully, she blinked and shook her head. It was only her mind playing tricks, fatigue weighing heavily on her like a thick fog. "Come on, stay with me," she muttered under her breath, turning to glance back at her phone. The battery icon blinked dangerously low, notifications for overdue bills piling up like ghosts in her inbox. Each ping felt like a reminder of failures, echoing through her thoughts like whispers from the walls of a deserted house, calling her to turn back. "Enough of this," she said, forcing herself to look back at the road. But the gas gauge dipped unnaturally fast, the needle twitching downward as if possessed. Panic gripped her chest, constricting it. In front of her, a flashing light appeared, the neon of Stuckey Gas Station shining like a beacon in the twilight. Finally, relief washed over her as she turned onto the gravel lot. The tires crumbled under the weight of the station, which seemed decrepit, yet oddly inviting, its peeling paint and rusty fixtures dripping with an allure that beckoned battered travelers like moths to a flame. Brooke parked and stepped out, the evening air filled with the smell of gasoline and something else, something almost sweet, yet unsettling. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, their flickering casting odd shadows across the precisely aligned shelves of products sitting in neat rows, each item seemingly untouched by time. The AC hummed softly, a whispering lullaby that sent chills down her spine. She hesitated and looked around the space, staring back at her in the security mirrors. Every reflection distorted, as if she were trapped inside a photograph developing too slowly. A billboard near her caught her eye, the words shifting imperceptibly as if alive. Curious, she leaned in to read the hourly rate posted beneath, a figure that seemed impossibly high, too good to be true. A knot formed in her stomach, but desperation chased away her composure. She found an application nestled among the precisely stacked brochures, the questions disturbing in their simplicity. Names scrawled in messy ink filled the margins, hinting at the stories of those who had come before her. Each line was a silent testament to those who had come before. Every stroke of the pen served as a warning. "Maybe it's a way out," she whispered, sealing her fate as she signed her name. The security camera above blinked with a staccato rhythm, almost like Morse code, sending an electric jolt through her spine. Something was watching, waiting. Brooke pushed through the bathroom door, the hinges creaking in protest. A wave of cold air enveloped her, sending goosebumps racing up her arms. She shivered and stepped inside, where a flickering fluorescent light cast a sickly glow on the cracked tiles. The light twitched impossibly, each breath she took combining warmth with coolness, like a forgotten memory. "Focus, Brooke," she muttered, shaking off the feeling that clung to her like the dampness in the air. She approached the mirror, its surface fogged and streaked with grime. As she wiped away a patch with her sleeve, her breath caught in the back of her throat. The glass shone achingly, revealing rules etched into its surface, seeming alive and pulsing with ominous energy in the cracks of the mirror. The lips of the reflections were crooked and tear-lined, silent mouths shaping words as if to reveal some dark secret. "Do not look again into the mirror after dark. Do not look away from your reflection," the first rule read, the letters slithering and shifting before her eyes. With each rule she absorbed, the lights dimmed and deeper shadows swallowed the room whole. "Stay calm," she whispered, but her heartbeat matched the rhythmic drip of the faucet behind her. Each drop echoed in the silence, a metronome for her growing fear, marking the thudding in her chest and amplifying the beastly feeling of catastrophe. "Don't let your mind wander to the next," warned a letter, its letters shuddering like a frightened animal. She felt a weight pressing upon her, forcing her thoughts into a whirlpool of anxiety and uncertainty. The faces in the mirror transformed into frightening grimaces, contorted by fear and despair. "Why am I here?" she thought, but the answer danced just out of reach, hidden behind the veil of the unknown. "Do not trust your reflection." The last rule burned into her mind, just as the overhead light flickered violently, plunging her into momentary darkness. She gasped, stumbling back against the sink, her hands gripping the porcelain edge. The steady drip of water continued, matching the beat of her racing heart. Panic surged as she steadied herself, But then the door swung shut with a force that reverberated through the tiles. The latch clicked into place, locking her inside. The heavy air pressed down on Brooke's heart, racing as she thought, "This isn't happening." But the rules buzzed inside her head, unabated, resounding with the desperation that clawed at her sanity. "Stay focused," she urged herself again, but the air grew heavier, constricting her thoughts. She turned back to the mirror, her eyes watering, thirsting for light, but only whirling shadows moved in the warped reflection staring back at her. Eyes wide and searching, she told herself, "Just breathe," but the spasms of gasping breaths felt caught in her throat like tangled threads. The world outside the bathroom door faded, leaving only the oppressive weight of secrets within these cracked, unreliable surfaces. Suddenly, the shadow shifted, and a sound, a soft tapping, began to rise from somewhere beyond the door. Rhythmic and deliberate, it felt as if it were calling for her toward something she could not yet understand. The bell above the gas station door jingled, heralding the arrival of a customer. Brooke jolted upright, suddenly aware that the bathroom felt like a claustrophobic cell. For a moment, she shuddered, torn between the eerie confinement of the restroom and the mysterious presence waiting just outside. "Get it together," she told herself, bracing for what lay ahead. As she stepped through the door into the main store area, her heart raced. There he was, a man in a water-stained green jacket, stepping into the dust without leaving any footprints, as if he moved with an almost spectral grace. His face was both compelling and unsettling. Could she help him? "Sunflower seeds," he said, his voice low and gravelly, as if it had emerged from deep within the earth. He took a satchel of seeds, his fingers rubbing against the bright wrapping, while his eyes remained fixed on something unseen behind her. "That's going to be $2.50, she said, scanning him with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. As she pressed the keys on the register, the prices began to flicker and change, numbers rearranging themselves into impossible combinations. A chill crept along her spine as she gazed transfixed. "Are you seeing this?" she asked, looking up at the man. His reflection in the register seemed to lag behind him, limbs moving in slow motion, as if he were caught in some sort of time loop. "Just get me the total," he urged, impatience lacing his voice. "Right," she thought, dialing in the last digit with trembling fingers. She handed him the change, and he pressed a dollar bill into her palm. It was ice cold, sending a shiver through her. "Thank you," he muttered, taking his bag and stepping toward the door. But as he moved out of her line of sight, something strange caught her attention. She eyed his shadow, which stretched unnaturally across the floor, elongating like a dark tendril reaching for something just beyond her view. "Wait," she called, but he was already gone, disappearing into the night like smoke dissipating in the wind. The bell above the door jingled lightly, and when she looked down, the register receipt was blank. Something is wrong here, she thought, her heart racing as she realized there was no trace of any transaction. Deep down, Brooke felt an unsettling shift as she looked around the store. Time slipped away, and the clock on the wall blinked. For a moment, she felt the jarring weight of missing minutes, a vacuum where reality should have been. She stood behind the counter, still stunned by her encounter with the strange customer. The air was thick and charged, pulsating like a heartbeat. An unnerving red light flickered above her, casting long shadows across the floor that danced with a life of their own. The light pulsed in rhythm with the weird beat throbbing in her chest, each drumbeat ringing through the silence. She blinked, trying to wash away the feeling of being watched, but that sensation only intensified. Shadows beneath the counter began to coil and twist like snakes. Her heart raced as she saw thin, twisted wires, resembling veins, writhing across the floor, exposed to the air. The sight sent a chill up her spine, and she battled the urge to step back. "Get a grip," she mumbled to herself, though the words felt empty in the oppressive atmosphere. The buzzing noise from the overhead light seemed to grow louder, static building in the air around her, making her hair stand on end. Brooke instinctively reached for her camera, seeking comfort in its familiar weight, but it felt oddly heavier in her hands. The store's electronics flared to life, screens illuminating with flickering interference. Her heart sank as she squinted at the monitor, showing the gas pumps outside. To her horror, they were moving despite the absence of anyone there, swaying gently, almost rhythmically, as if calling for her with every beat of the red beacon. The thermometer fell, creating an unnatural chill that seeped into her bones. Just a malfunction, she reassured herself, but doubt gnawed at the edges of her mind. She looked down at her camera, fingers shaking as she clicked through recent photos. Each image appeared distorted, colors swirling and contorting in a spasmodic visual dance that made her stomach churn. "Okay, this is not normal," she whispered, her breath coming in heaves. The thumping and pumping grew louder, syncing with her heartbeat as she reluctantly stepped toward the door. Outside, the filling stations stood as silent sentinels, their glowing digital displays ominous against the dark sky. "Maybe I can catch a glimpse of what's going on," she murmured, glancing back at the store, half hoping Elliot or even that strange man would show up again. But the store remained deathly quiet as she opened the door. The cold air swooshed in, embracing her as if welcoming her into its chill. The rhythmic pumping continued, beating in time with the wild rhythm of her heartbeat. Instinctively, Brooke raised her camera and pointed it toward the nearest pump. The lens focused, but something shifted in her peripheral vision, a blur of movement. "Hello?" Her voice trembled, choked by the hollow emptiness of the night. To her horror, the unmanned pumps began lurching forward, sliding slightly to one side, eager for a caress. The lights flickered, spinning back like clock hands, unwinding time itself. She stood entranced as puddles of gas formed impossible patterns on the concrete, swirling into shapes that were both thrilling and sinister. Suddenly, shadowy figures emerged from the darkness, growing larger and more defined. They swam around the pumps, their forms indistinguishable, yet undeniably present. The air crackled with energy, and another shiver coursed through her body. Brooke's breathing quickened as she realized that the shadows were somehow closing in, merging with the eerie glow of the gas station. "Get back!" she shouted, but her words felt futile against the rising tide of fear. The shadows changed shape, blurring as she fell back, her heart racing with desperation to break free from the supernatural grip of the gas station. The fluorescent lights flickered as Brooke leaned against the icy counter, her pulse still racing from the shadows that had danced around her moments before. Each beat echoed in her ears, syncing with the rhythmic dipping of the gas pumps. The tapping was soft, 3 knocks, a pause, then two softer ones. She felt something was wrong, like a nursery rhyme turned into a nightmare. "Hello?" she called out, her voice wavering in the silence. The door opened just enough to reveal a figure standing just outside, draped in shadow. As the figure stepped into the dim light, Brooke's breath caught in her throat. The newcomer was too perfect. Pristine uniform, crisp against their skin, hair perfectly styled as if carved by an artist's hands. Their eyes shone unnaturally bright under the flickering lights. "Are you the new hire?" the figure asked, their voice smooth, sweet, and melodic, yet laced with something oddly dissonant. "Yeah, I'm Brooke," she replied, forcing her gaze downward to avoid meeting those unsettling eyes. Instinctively, she felt for her name tag, but couldn't find it. A shiver crept up her spine as she sensed the temperature dropping around them. "It's nice to meet you, Brooke," the employee said, their smile widening to reveal teeth that seemed too white, too straight, almost unnatural. "I'm Alex," they continued, though the name hung oddly in the air like a whisper that didn't belong. "Is it always this quiet?" Brooke asked, trying to break the silence. "Quiet is relative," Alex replied, tilting their head slightly. The movement felt too deliberate, too calculated. As Brooke took a closer look, she noticed shadows twisting around Alex, not containing the natural contours of their form, but instead shifting into multiple shapes beneath their feet. Can I help you with something?" she stammered, nervousness creeping into her voice. "Not yet, but soon enough," they said, tapping their fingers lightly on the countertop. The rhythm from the tapping had become muffled, oddly resonant, sending ripples through the air. "Your hours are going to change." Alex stepped a little closer, their presence overwhelming. "You'll be working late shifts, right?" Brooke said slowly, trying to maintain her composure. Something felt amiss. She glanced down at the name tag clipped to Alex's chest, which displayed different names that popped up, changing like reflections in water. Carl, Jenna, Roger. Too many identities for one person. "Everything all right?" Alex asked, the twist of the right corner of their mouth becoming a smile that sent ice swirling through Brooke's veins. "Yeah, just tired," she replied, forcing the words out, despite the unease settling in her gut. Brooke managed to speak, though her heart raced faster than ever. The words dripped from her lips with a creepy sweetness, for the night had many interesting things in store. As the cool air enveloped her, Brooke instinctively wrapped her arms around herself, feeling the atmosphere thicken like fog. There was something seriously amiss with Alex, something that twisted the very fabric of reality around them. The shadows under Alex's feet began to writhe, coiling like serpents as he stepped forward, invading her space. "Just remember, Brooke," his voice fell to a whisper, yet it echoed with a hidden menace, each shift revealing new possibilities. Before she could respond, the lights flickered violently, plunging the store into half-darkness. Brooke squinted into the gloom, where Alex's features dissolved into obscurity, leaving only a vague outline. "Wait," she started, but suddenly everything shifted. Her surroundings spun, the world blurred at the edges as if caught in a whirlwind. A voice called her name, but it was swallowed by the darkness, the last thing she heard before stepping into the bathroom, where the mirror beckoned her with a chilling allure. Breathless, she approached the cracked glass, her fingertips trailing across its surface, leaving frost-like trails. Coolness crept through her skin, pulling her deeper into its clutch. Letters began to appear, branding themselves onto the steamed mirror, words forming before she could comprehend them. Suddenly, her reflection wrote a different word entirely. Found. Panic surged through her as the room spun faster, the air thickening and constricting her lungs. A sharp crack echoed through the space, but the glass did not shatter, a lonely witness to her unraveling. Brooke stepped back from the bathroom mirror, her heart racing as the air grew thicker around her. The fluorescent lights above buzzed erratically, casting a dubious glow over the gas station's interior. With every exhalation, the walls seemed to throb, curving and swelling, like an unseen creature drawing in a deep breath. "Stay focused," she whispered to herself, but the words felt flat and empty against the low hum of the store, vibrating with an unquiet energy. She took a step forward, but the floor tiles shifted beneath her feet, rearranging as if they had a mind of their own. One moment, she was heading for the door. The next, she found herself standing in front of the candy aisle once more. Colors flickered at the edges of her vision. Deep purples and sickly greens curled into knots and shapes, dancing away with each blink, leaving only the oppressive gray of the gas station's interior. Brooke smoothed a hand over her rumpled hair in an attempt to dispel the creeping dread. "Just get to the door," she urged herself, her gaze fixed on the exit. It felt almost within reach, yet simultaneously distant, making every step stretch the distance between them. The door, now only a faint outline against the oppressive gloom, seemed to retreat further into the shadows. "Come on," she hissed, frustration mounting as tears welled in her eyes, but the harsh reality of the situation clawed at her. As Brooke stepped into the store, its interior began to shift, the aisles looping like a jigsaw puzzle. A sense of disorientation enveloped her, the weight of something unseen pressing down, lurking in the sharp corners of her mind. Doubts whispered louder than her own thoughts, her pulse racing as she pressed ahead, forcing her legs to move despite the increasing heaviness in her body. The shelves loomed tall, familiar products grotesquely distorted, as if they were conscious of her need. The walls seemed to breathe, exhaling a cold draft that sent shivers racing down her spine. "Help!" she screamed, but her voice was swallowed by the silence, a mere flicker of sound before vanishing completely. A shiver ran through her as she turned back up the aisle, where the fluorescent lights flickered in rhythm with her pounding heart. "Focus, you can do this," she whispered aggressively to herself, but the store receded with its own beat, a syncopation echoing her mounting terror, taunting her, twisting her perception, and making impossibilities flesh. With one last surge of will, Brooke lunged forward, but the door stretched away, yawning open like a hungry maw, while the walls closed in around her. Colors swirled in a kaleidoscopic distortion of her surroundings, splintering into an abstract nightmare where nothing felt real. She staggered back, the world blurring inward, her breath catching in her chest as everything folded in on itself. A terrifying realization settled over her. She was no longer in control. The gas station was folding her world like origami, binding her within its silken folds, an overwhelming sense of despair consuming her as she unraveled the very threads of her identity. Silence enveloped her, and Brooke found herself gazing at the cracked linoleum. A chill moved through her bones, and when she looked up, she felt her heart drop into her abdomen, vested directly into the gas station structure. Photographs of former artists and dreamers, caught in moments long dead, stared blankly at her, their eyes hot with a pleading for release. "Why?" she whispered, reaching out tentatively to touch one photo, only for it to crumble under her fingers, revealing hidden signatures beneath layers of dust. Names she recognized, and others she did not, all mingling together in a ghostly tapestry. Semi-finished masterpieces adorned the walls, each a requiem for what had been lost, fading into invisibility. A colored mist swirled around her, vivid hues seeping into the stagnant air, tugging at her senses with a bittersweet allure. "Is this what I've become?" she murmured, her voice shaking as she stepped deeper into the room. Shadows flickered in the corners, remnants of those who had come before her, specters reaching from the mirrors that covered the walls. "Help us," it seemed their mouths were saying, moving silently in pain, their twisted faces locked in fear, forever trapped in this cage. Understanding dawned within her. This was not just a different, empty gas station. It was a vessel, a collector of souls, siphoning their very need to power its dark energy. "Not me," she shuddered, gasping as a wave of icy dread washed over her. Yet even as she uttered those words, she felt the coils of despair winding tighter around her heart, pulling her closer to the fate that awaited her in this dirty sod. The clock on the wall distorted in her periphery, its hands sliding like mercury, pooling into odd shapes that defied time itself. Brooke's heart raced as she blinked, every pulsation echoing against the strange rhythm of the landscape, an eerie beat thumping under her skin. "Where am I?" she whispered, though the question felt pointless. The air grew oppressive, a heavy blanket woven with uncertainty and dread, as flickers of movement caught her eye, a shadow darting just out of sight. She turned sharply, her heart pounding, but nothing remained of the remnants of the old. They began to melt away before her eyes. Her belongings, once vibrant, now faded into the walls. A scarf hung limply from a hook, its colors leaching away into dull grays, juxtaposed against a half-empty coffee cup that had melted into the countertop. Steam evaporated into the ether. "Not again," Brooke muttered, her hope weighed down by the strands of her hair. Yet the creative spirit still veered around her, soft hues of blue and violet shimmering like daybreak, reaching for her, fingers stroking over an invisible mist that vibrated with potentiality, the very essence of her dreams and aspirations, intoxicating, yet horrific. A flash of light caught her eye around the bathroom mirror, where the laws of reality had already begun to rewrite themselves. The letters glowed with an unnatural energy, shifting and twisting as if alive. "Creativity is a monster," it seemed to whisper, breathing directly into her mind, accompanied by a cold reminder: to create is to sacrifice. "Stop," she cried, stepping forward, but her reflection was violently ruffled, distorting her features into grotesque caricatures. Every rule taunted her, redressing her perception of art and life in this damned world. "Not like this," she pleaded to the vapors of emptiness, her resolve hardening against the despair threatening to engulf her. A sinister aura pulsated through the floor like a heartbeat, the flashing fluorescent lights overhead buzzing intensely. Suddenly, the world shifted. The aisles rearranged themselves like pieces of an abstract puzzle, shelves sliding and merging in an ever-repeating cycle, reset by the station. An expectation crackled in the air, a dark excitement waiting to ensnare her within its web. "Please, not me," she whispered, her voice trembling amidst the commotion. In that instant, she realized she was part of the play, a new victim destined to take the stage in this surreal theater of horrors. Each breath she took pulled her a step further into an abyss from which there could be no retreat.